Hi, welcome to Healing the Trauma Within. In this session, I am speaking with Altagracia Felix about rewriting your story by changing the lens. A little bit about Altagracia. She is an intuitive money and trauma coach and is the CEO of R2E, which stands for Revitalize, Reinvent, and Empower. She completed her certification as a money coach from the Money Coaching Institute. As a three-time survivor of abuse, Alta knows the struggles that comes with this experience. Her coaching programs specifically serve the needs of women who have experienced abuse or trauma and are consciously ready to step into healing. Through intuitive money and trauma coaching, she empowers her clients to heal their relationship with not only themselves, but also with others and so much more. Welcome, Altagracia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you here.
I'm excited. I'm ready.
I love this topic. I think one of my favorite parts about the healing journey is getting to rewrite our stories because we can make it be whatever it is that we want. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it's very, very powerful. Mm-hmm. Now, what do you mean by rewriting your story by changing the lens, though?
Okay. So have you ever heard I think there's the saying is that there's multiple ways to skin a cat, right? Like there's a bunch of
right.
So there's a bunch of ways to look at your trauma. And you can change the lens. So you can look at it through the lens of being a victim. You can look at it through the lens of being a survivor. You can completely detach yourself from the experience and just observe it. So you can choose how you want to see your experience and which lens is actually going to benefit you the most. And I think that's the goal. For me, it was viewing my experience objectively. So I wasn't trying to view it as a survivor or as a victim. I was just trying to observe my experience. Like, why is this happening to me? Why has it happened to me 3 times? What is the common denominator? Like really objectively, just like, all right, it happened. What am I supposed to learn? How can I avoid this situation going forward? And so what I realized was that I needed to stop and look back. And I chose to look back through an objective lens to separate myself from the experience so that I wasn't allowing my emotions to get in the way of just the experience. Just like, what was it? And that's what I mean by that.
Okay. Which makes perfect sense. You want to change the way you see things, you change your perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
So how do we go about rewriting our stories?
So I'll share a little bit of one of my stories, and I think that'll help people understand how I went about doing that. So I went, as you mentioned, through 3 consecutive abusive relationships from the age of 14 to the age of 27. So quite a long time of just leaving, spending some time alone and ending up in another one and so on and so forth. What I was doing was running. So I would like leave the relationship and like, oh, I'm fine. Everything's going to be good. I left. Everything's great now. And just moving forward, moving on, and ended up in another one. Did the same thing again, ended up in another one. So by the 3rd time, I was like, okay, like this stops here. Like the buck stops right here. Like I am not going to live the rest of my life like this. And so what I did is I turned around, and I like to say the analogies because I literally felt like I separated my soul, my spirit from my physical body and turned around and said, okay, what's happening? And what I found in all of my experiences was twofold, right? So the one thing that I found was that I was the common denominator in every single one of those situations. So therefore, there had to be something with me that I needed to do. It wasn't that it was my fault that I experienced those experiences, but I was attracting this kind of person and I needed to know why and how, because abuse doesn't start overnight. It's a slow process that happens over time. And so where am I dropping the ball? Where am I missing the red flag? Like what is happening there? And that allowed me to like I said, to see myself, to see me as the thing that I needed to focus on and not anyone else outside of me. And that there was a lot of inner work and a lot of inner healing that I needed to do for myself. But the other thing that I did about rewriting my story is my last abusive relationship lasted about 3 years. And I moved to a whole new state with my kids. I have one aunt here, but she lives far enough that I really didn't get to go see her. So it was just me, him, our kids, and his family. And you know, like I demanded that we moved to a pretty nice area so that my kids could go to a good school, because I came from a state that had good schools. So I was like, I'm not moving my kids to Philly and putting my kids in a shitty, excuse my language, crappy school when they're coming from a good school system. Like, I'm not doing that. When it comes to my kids, I can stand my ground. And so you know, we ended up moving to a really good neighborhood. Kids were going to a really phenomenal school. His kids ended up moving in with us, and you know, I advocated for their schools to be changed as well. And when they changed, they walked into this new school. One of his kids was in 4th grade, I believe, but she was reading at like a 3rd or 2nd grade level. And his other kid was in 3rd grade reading at a 1st kindergarten grade level. Within that year, they both reached grade level in reading and math and behavior, like everything completely changed for them. And when I looked back at that abusive relationship and it was like, what was the purpose in that relationship? What was I supposed to learn? I realized that in that particular relationship, there was nothing in it for me, but I was there to give a gift to his children. And by me being in their life, and yes, I experienced trauma, but now they're going to an exceptional school and they actually have an opportunity at succeeding in life that they would not have had otherwise, because no one else was advocating for them in the way that I did. And I took that piece of that story and that was my rewriting of that story. That was it. I'm no longer looking at it as, you know, I moved to this new state. I gave up everything to come here for this relationship. He abused me. It was awful. The kids, like, I dumped all of that because none of that was serving me. But what has served me is I sacrificed a piece of my life for these 2 little children who are now going to have a lifetime of benefit. I can live with that, and I can smile, and I can express gratitude and appreciation for that gift that I was able to give someone else.
That is very powerful. It's almost like looking for the silver lining in,
absolutely,
you know, a terrible situation. You know, people ask me, what have I learned or what have I gained from all of the abuse situations, the sexual assaults, all of that. You know, was there anything to learn from those? And my thought is, you know, kind of like yours, is I went through that so that I could advocate and help others. You know, I gave up those pieces of my life so that I could learn and go through it, and I can understand and relate with other women who have been through it, who need my help to heal.
Absolutely.
And that's how I look at it. And that's helped me to accept and heal from my past.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely that is a very crucial component of it, of finding that silver lining. Sometimes it's not for you. And that was something that I learned. Sometimes it is for others. And what I have come to believe for myself is that, I don't know if you're spiritual or not, God is how I refer to source, our creator,
Right.
Puts certain people through certain things because he knows, or she knows, right? Our creator knows that we're going to be able to come out on the other side, that we're going to be able to gain a certain level of wisdom, a certain level of insight that we can then turn around and share, right? If we can see that, we can turn around and share and become a beacon of hope and a beacon of light for those who might need a little bit of extra support going through that. I fully believe that life happens for us and not to us.
Mm-hmm.
To think it happens to us because it's just the way our society works. But there's 3 little steps that I like to do, and it's the 1, recognize, 2, accept, right? Because through those 2 things, you can then seek out the information, the lesson, the blessing, whatever is hidden in your experience. But first you have to recognize that you've gone through something that's difficult and accept that it's difficult and not run from that, because that's what I was doing, was running from the pain, running from all of that. And that's why I kept ending up in a new burner,
Mm-hmm.
the same ingredients in it. And it wasn't until I didn't do that anymore that I was able to make a difference, make a different choice, right? And change. And it had nothing to do with anyone else outside of me, but it had everything to do with how am I going to show up moving forward? Like, how am I going to advocate for myself moving forward?
Right.
But I've never been able to do that.
So yes, you can continue to look at your story as something that happened to you, which would be coming from a victim mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can choose to change your perspective, change your lens, look at it from a survivor thriver standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you absolutely have that choice.
Mm-hmm.
So
you have that choice. I think I don't mean to cut you off, but I just feel
you're fine.
Yeah, like you have that choice and take it. Like take the choice and forget what anyone else has to say about anything. You have the right to look at your experience and find what serves you and leave what doesn't behind.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we've been through terrible things that have happened in our lives, and dwelling on them does not serve us. At least it doesn't me. It makes me feel icky. It brings me down. It triggers my depression when I dwell on things that have happened in my life.
There's
And
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I choose to just let them go.
Yeah. There's this book called Radical Acceptance by Tara Bach. Amazing book that everyone should read. I did not know that I was implementing the same process that she actually wrote in this book. And I wish I would have read the book, because it probably would have saved me a year and a half time. But nonetheless, she talks about learning to be okay with the uncomfortable emotions. Like, we all want to be numb, but a part of being alive is to feel. And so when you can learn to feel, but not be attached to those feelings, to understand that they're just passing through us and create space for them to do so, then you can find that freedom, that healing, and coming through to the other side. What happens is we don't want to feel it. So these emotions get trapped in our bodies. Like, they get trapped, they manifest into illnesses, stress, depression, all types of things, because we refuse to create space for them to pass through. And so it's like, oh, it's there, and you just shut down, and you're angry, and you're like feeling all these things. But when you sit down and you say, okay, like, I'm having a crappy day today and I want to cry, and you grab your bottle of wine and you cry, like, that's a good thing. Like, that's a good thing. Cry, my love. Cry until there are no more tears left, right? When you feel fear, analyze it. Accept that it's there, but analyze it. Where is this coming from? Why am I feeling this way? What is this tied to? And that's something that I'm big at. I look at triggers as a beautiful thing. And that's even a rewriting and a switching of the lens, right? Because you can look at triggers as something that it's uncomfortable. It brings something up in you that's uncomfortable. But you can also take that opportunity to get to the root of that trigger. It's open, right? It's a reflection from the universe that this little thing right here needs a little more healing. This little thing right here needs a little bit more of your attention. Can you take the time to nurture it? Can you take the time to open this wound up and be with it as if it were your child coming to you with an open cut, right? What would you do? You'd sit with them, you'd hug them, you'd kiss them, you'd clean it out. You'd put, ointment in there so that it'll heal properly. You'll cover it with a Band-Aid. You'll check on it the next day and the day after that until it looks better. That's how we need to treat our triggers. And if we can look at our triggers with love and compassion, that alone is you switching a major lens that can allow you to learn the tools in the process of dealing with these triggers that are literally going to come up for a very long time. But it's a matter of a trigger coming up and you being down for a day versus a trigger coming up and you being down for months because of it.
Right.
Like, get to the point where it's just a day or two, right? Like where you can create the space and the time for you to process the trigger, do the healing work to heal that trigger, which requires doing what I just described, the going in, the actually nurturing the wound, understanding how it got cut so that you know how to clean it and how to, how to fix it, how to make it better.
Absolutely beautifully said. Beautifully said. And you're not the first speaker in this summit to talk about our triggers being beautiful things as opposed to horrible things that we're now stuck living with.
Yeah.
And I like that. I really, really like that because it does. It gives us, okay, I'm triggered now. Let's explore this. What do I still need to work on? What do I still need to heal?
Yeah.
You know, how can I prevent this trigger from affecting me in my future? Or, you know, how do I cope with it the next time it happens? Whatever, you know, it makes you more empowered.
Absolutely. And that's the key, is to regain your power. Experiencing an experience like the ones we have disempowers you, or at least makes you feel completely disempowered. And so doing things like taking control and ownership over how you respond to your life and how you're going to live your life moving forward is so empowering, right? You reclaiming that power that was stripped from you in those experiences, and consciously choosing to step in to a new version of you, whatever that new version is, and making that new version greater and better than, you know, whatever was there before. Like, we have the ability to do that. I believe like all women have this immense level of just divinity inside of them that we sometimes lose sight of. I mean, just think about it. You got out of your experience. How much courage and strength and patience and resilience, how much of that did you have to be in order to make it out? We can't forget that once we get out. Like, and a lot of us do. We forget that badass woman that
right.
Do not forget her. Tap into her and use that same stuff to lift yourself even higher beyond the trauma that you're, you know, that's lingering. Like, do whatever you got to do to get through that to the other side.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Alta, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today. This has been fantastic. And I could talk about this for a lot longer, but want to recognize everybody's time. So
you can easily, I can easily get, you know, all in here and
right.
So, you know, like you, so passionate.
It very, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thank you again for coming on and sharing with us, especially sharing part of your story. That takes a lot of courage and strength, and I want to recognize that.
Thank you.
And listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you in one of the other sessions.
Bye.